Hey, everybody, we're live. We're in the green room. And of course, we've got our amazing producer, Elle, and of course, my co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar. But more importantly, we got two guests, and we're going to go deep with each one of them. So in reverse order, Ron Miller, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about today?
I am in Western Massachusetts today, and we're going to be talking about, the news. And there's so much news in tech. I mean, in everything, but in tech in particular, we're going to be talking about AI because, of course, everybody's talking about AI. Maybe we'll talk about, the DOJ suing to stop the Juniper HP deal. We can talk
what
about
happened there?
Yeah. I know, crazy, right? Then we can talk about, the quarterly cloud numbers. There's no shortage of stuff to talk about.
I know. Things are moving really fast. Jennifer, where are we coming in from? Welcome back. And what are we talking about?
Well, I'm from Bahamas today, which is really cool. It's lovely, and it's the perfect temperature every day and every night. So I'm going to enjoy that for the next week. But I'm here to talk about work and people's high level of dissatisfaction and disengagement at work, and what are some of the things that they're dealing with, like AI anxiety and FOBO, fear of becoming obsolete, and what we can do about it as leaders to fix it.
Will bring us some warmth from the Bahamas. I'm going to turn it back to Elle for the count.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our guests your questions. We'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see my co-host on TV just about every day, Bloomberg, CNBC, Yahoo Finance. I also consider him to be one of the top futurists on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless, A New Mindset for Unlimited Business Success, and a #1 seller on Amazon. But it's not about this. It's executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can see him on business TV outlets like Bloomberg, ABC, and of course, posting insightful analyses on ZDNet, and of course, a flurry of Twitter tweets, or posts, or whatever they are in X today. But hey, it's not about us. It's about our amazing guests and who's bringing in the warmth today, Vala.
Oh, we're so delighted to have Jennifer Moss back on our show. Jennifer is author of Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture Everyone Wants. This is a new book that was just launched last month. Jennifer is an international speaker, award-winning journalist and author, workplace culture strategist, and co-founder of the Work Better Institute, a global workforce policy think tank. Jennifer is nationally syndicated radio columnist and writes for Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and Fortune. As a workplace expert, Jennifer is regularly invited by global media outlets to share her research and insights. Jennifer specializes in future-focused leadership development, expertly balancing employee well-being and performance. Why Are We Here is Jennifer's third leadership book focused on workplace culture and wellness. Her last book, The Burnout Epidemic, was named by Thinkers 50 as one of the 10 best new management books of 2022. In fact, Jennifer was on our show 2 years ago, 2023, talking about this incredible book. So welcome back, Jennifer, to DisrupTV.
Oh, I'm so excited to be back. I love how you guys lead off the show by introducing each other. It's just like there's just so much, enthusiasm for each other, and the show just gets everyone pumped up. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. He's my best friend, so I like talking about him.
You could tell. I love it. It's such great energy. It's excellent.
Well, hey, I really appreciate it. And this book is pivotal, especially given where we are. We're actually at the edge of where AI could take over and humanity could be lost. Purpose is going to be important, but the question is, why are we here? But how did you develop the idea for this book? And I love how it's laid out. So what is that genesis? Because from the other book, right, it feels like I just took off and picked up from there. So
yeah, it's interesting because it does feel like an evolution from there. Like, okay, this is where we're at. We're all in crisis. We're all burning out. And this is, why we're burning out. And there was some tactical, applications in the book, but this is really this next level of we have not had a reset. When I wrote this book, I assumed, okay, we'd get back to some normalcy. We had skyrocketed to 252% increase in meetings. And I thought, oh, well, that'll level off. Nothing's changed. We're just still in this state of toxic productivity. And a lot of people are asking this existential question, why are we here? And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we faced our mortality collectively, and it changed the behavioral mindset. The psychology of the workforce really, really changed.
And, so your books have covered happiness, and then certainly your book about burnout and now, culture and questioning what really matters or what should matter. And you write that work is fundamentally broken. So how did we get here? And hopefully the path to getting out of here will be reading your book and your shared wisdom.
Well, I loved writing Unlocking Happiness at Work. At the time, it was really in those early stages of positive psychology. And a lot of it was psychological fitness and, building up the strategies for us as individuals to be able to have more fuel and fun at work. But what came out of that was this realization that there's only about 20% of the entire global workforce that is happy and engaged at work. So what is the reason why people aren't happy and fueled up by work? And then what I found was people are really burned out and chronically stressed. And so now it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? Because it hasn't gotten better. What are we going to do? And that's why I broke the book up into these 3 parts. And you mentioned that, Ray, like the setup. It's really like, let's start with the foundational, just psychological barriers to chronic stress and to I think a happy life, the skills that we need to lead a better life. And when you're facing your mortality, you're asking, is this worth my time? Should I be in this chronic state of stress? No. So how can we make it better? The second part is, what are these big business challenges that we've never really faced until this last 5 years, like rapid acceleration of AI, huge generational differences that are polarizing us, freedom, like return to office mandates and all of those issues around flexibility. And the last part is around belonging and recognition, because if we're polarized, if we don't get along, how are we going to have a shared vision? How are we going to meet those goals? And so that's why I broke it up into these sort of foundational pieces. And then the traits that I think leaders need to be able to see, a happier and healthier experience of work.
This is great. I mean, the foundation, right? This is really how do we get to that pursuit of happiness, right? The challenges are real, but the challenges you bring up aren't necessarily business challenges. They're societal challenges that we're all kind of get at. And then, of course, when you think about, the end state of where we're going to go, that is very, very different than what most people would have imagined. And this really brings into the question, really what, one of the key premises of your book is that we're all experiencing a shared existential crisis. And you said toxic productivity. That's kind of interesting. It's like, I think I remember hearing you say that before. And that's like, it's starting to resonate with a lot of people because they see exactly that. What is that end state? And so the question is, what triggered it? How has it changed the way we approach work? How do we, this shared existential crisis, it seems to come at multiple dimensions too.
Yeah. It's like this black swan event. I mean, we had the pandemic, which should have been a catalyst moment where we would have had surge capacity and then we would have moved on. So the length of that has just changed the neural wiring. Our behaviors have become habitual, and then we don't know how to shake those bad habits. We've just continued to keep plugging away. That toxic productivity is and there's a lot of reasons for that. We talked about with this, in the burnout epidemic, it is institutional stressors, it's policy, it's organizational stressors, but it's us as individuals that play a role too. Those habits that we built, now we're waking up in the morning on, we go through the entire day on, and then now we've had this increase in what is affectionately called pajama hours, the hours where you're like having your glass of wine beside you, but you're in your pajamas, and it's like, we call that fun work because you're kind of drunk while you're doing it. I mean, that is not healthy. This is terrible.
What do you mean?
It's not fun. It's just, we're so on, and that has become our own DNA now. And no organization is going to stop you from doing that. And that's where we need, organizations to come in and put some barriers around that. And we need to recognize that the boundaries have been completely crossed. Those lines are so blurred right now. We need to shift that habit.
Jen, I was going to say something cool. Like, when the pandemic hit, the only thing I knew I could do was just work harder. Literally everybody I knew I had to work harder. I knew we were in crisis mode, and like literally it was just calling everyone up I knew. It was like calling everyone I knew, trying to figure out what was going on, it's like, and I don't think I've stopped since then. So I feel like I've worked twice as hard as I did before the pandemic, and I'm not sure why. So, and I can't answer the question. I haven't burned out yet. There used to be a bet. There's my old RD at Forrester, a guy named Eric. Eric Brown basically had a bet to see I would burn out when I was at Forrester, and he lost. But the point is, I haven't burned out yet, but I can see the impact around me, because the way I view free time is very different than I used to.
I love that. That's a really important statement, because the research and a big catalyst to why I wrote the book was this conversation that I had in an Uber. This woman that I was speaking to, she was on track to be the first female Black partner in her firm. And she lost 3 people in the pandemic and quit her entire career pathway and started driving an Uber, and was, working on this passion project in Costa Rica, probably working just as hard, but she was doing something that she felt was compelling for her. And I asked her why, and she said, life is short. And when I started to really understand the research, because I kept hearing this from people making really big moves in this great resignation. They were leaving CEO jobs like we've never seen before. And I looked into the research, and Dr. Jeffrey Greenberg is really fascinating. There's other, people like Jeffrey Pfeffer that have looked into this. But what they find is when you have a mortality salience moment, so you face the finitude of your life, you actually subconsciously start to catalog priorities and you shift them. Because you feel like life is short. So you're going to want to do more of the things that give you joy and pleasure and happiness. And if things feel toxic in a grind, you're going to move those down the list. And so that's why purpose became so consequential to people, whether they chose to stay or leave a job. That became the number one reason. And a lot of it is just subconsciously, when we went through this collectively, we've changed, and it's biological. It's neurally, change us. And so, the framework that leaders are using to try to fix things, you can't work with that without knowing what the barriers are to people's motivation and engagement.
Every time I have to read Dr. Greenberg, he says I have a phobia, so I stopped reading about him. Vala, sorry. Go ahead. Inside joke.
Reading. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, Ray, your commentary about working harder, and I feel the same. I mean, there's no 5-day work week barrier. There's no time barrier.
Nope.
And I just watched a TED Talk. I don't remember the title, but it was the longest happiness research by Harvard, 75-year research covering 700 plus people for 75 years, from different economic, from Harvard students to the poorest population in the Boston area. And ultimately, the result is that the number one predictor of health and happiness was quality of relationships, not fame, not fortune. And I think about the distance that was between us in COVID. And so you couldn't validate as much the sense of belonging because you weren't in the office. The boss didn't pat you in the back. You couldn't find sponsors or mentors easily. There was just a divide, that digital divide. So it was harder to determine sense of belonging and then also sense of mattering. Like you could feel like you belong to something, but does your work matter? All of it seemed like hopelessness. So maybe you have to shift into fifth gear, Ray, and just work harder so you can validate to yourself, I belong to this organization, my work matters, and you have to kind of prove it to yourself. So hope is a big part of your book. And you write that there's hopelessness academic at work. So can you talk about the importance of hope and how we as business leaders need to ensure that we create an environment where people can still dream big, hope big, and do big?
It's a major, I think, a major barrier to people's sense of loyalty and engagement and connection and community, because we're seeing a massive increase in hopelessness right now as we've moved from just this one acute crisis to polycrisis, which essentially is multiple crises that cluster and making each crisis worse. And we're in that state right now, and people are feeling like, when are we going to get the break? When are we going to get the rest? There's so much hyperbole and the headlines we read. We're seeing AI anxiety, for example. 1 in 2 global workers are feeling the sense of AI anxiety.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a huge data point. And a big part of that is that they don't understand, how ubiquitous AI really is in our lives, but also they see organizations taking in technology and adopting technology without a real strategy or plan. They don't really understand where they fit in. You're seeing young people put off family planning because they feel a sense of hopelessness when it comes to their financial well-being. All of that you can imagine. If you don't have hope societally, how can you go into work and think, oh, the work that I'm going to do is going to lead to me being promoted, or is going to lead to me actually contributing something that's valuable? How am I going to see my career path in 5 years when I don't even know if I'm going to be obsolete in 6 months? And so this disconnect in the communication around helping people to feel more hopeful is an important strategy. And it's why I put it at the front of the book, because if we don't do that, we can't do any of the other things. We can't solve any of these problems. We need to deal with people's hopelessness and build hope so that they feel like, oh, this is worth it. They're not asking, why am I here? They know the point of why they're there.
Wow. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. And when I'm thinking about what's going on, I mean, you talk about the hope area, we talk about other areas. I mean, we're in a massive RTO mandate. And we're seeing it everywhere. I was out in Texas and Austin and talking to like 3 or 4 people, and they're like, I have never ever worked in the office. I've always worked remote. And this friend of mine was basically saying, I don't know what to do. Like I've never actually had to come in, and suddenly we now all have to come in. And I've been in the workplace 20 years, and I thought I was going to be remote for quite some time, and it's adding a lot of stress. But is it freedom and flexibility they want, or is it agency and autonomy?
So they all kind of come together. I mean, when you look at the 6 root causes of burnout, lack of agency or autonomy is one of the 6 root causes of burnout. So it's going to stress people out. But one of the things that has happened, and I have to tell you, I really am frustrated by these return to office mandates. They are not in alignment with the data that we've seen. You look at Stanford professor Nick Bloom and Mark Ma from Pittsburgh, and all of the data that they've come up with has found that these mandates are not actually improving cohesion. It doesn't improve morale. Productivity declines. It's exclusive. It leaves out women. There's just a lot of reasons not to do it. Whereas we look at companies like Atlassian, fully distributed, but they understand that there's an aspect of work that needs to be in person. And that's why their satellite offices have 91% occupancy rates. So people know that they can go there to see each other, but they're not mandated to do so. And it really does change a person's sense of freedom. And this, I think, was the reason why it was my favorite chapter to write, because it was an aha moment where I kind of understood why people are so resistant. And the fact that it is that we gave people this sense of freedom and autonomy, and now we're trying to claw it back. It isn't just that people are lazy and, entitled and want to work remotely because they just don't want to be, productive on the job, or they want to get away with not working. It's that you've given them freedom. The data has pointed to it being a very productive decision, and it hasn't impacted revenue. You look at the data from those that were working at Amazon. I mean, all of those folks are saying, look at what we accomplished, like best numbers that we've seen in forever. And we did all of that remote. And so I think the data isn't lying. People feel it's arbitrary, and when you have a freedom and someone takes it away, it's like this fundamental sense of wanting to right that wrong. You want to hold on to that so deeply, and it's often subconscious. You don't even know it, but it's so baked into our hardwire, our DNA to fight for it. So when it is, whether there's a good reason or not, you still are going to be resistant. But when there's not a good reason, then you're going to feel even more fiercely, angry and stressed out and frustrated with your organization and leadership making those decisions.
We briefly talked about AI, and it's hard to ignore the topic given its potential impact. We're talking about digital labor. We're talking about giving agency to now software to not just assist, but automate and operate in an autonomous fashion. And so huge priority for companies with huge potential ROI, but also a huge source of anxiety for workers. In your research writing the book, what are your thoughts in terms of the impact of AI on work and what you've talked about, which is FOBO, fear of becoming obsolete? I think about like the chess grandmaster or a Go grandmaster spending decades of their life to become the best in the world. And then a piece of software plays itself for 4 hours and it can never be beaten again by a human. So I'm like, what does experience mean in the future of work? When you can, when you're in the business of creating intelligence in work and you can now do it with software, like I can understand and appreciate why there's FOBO. And how do we as business leaders frame this future where you actually have hope and can see yourself as a productive member of society?
I think you make such a good point here, because our life satisfaction really is tied to work. If you look at Martin Seligman's work, it's PERMA, it's positive feelings about life, but it's also that engagement and meaning and accomplishment that we get for a life well lived. And if we think about taking work away from people, from human beings, and swapping that in for technology, I think that would be not just an economic disaster, but it would be, a really, societal disaster. We need to be thinking more around partnership with AI, and people talk about this partnership with AI, but what we're seeing in the strategy around adopting it has been just too fast without enough understanding of the strategy. 78% of people are BYO AI to work. So, I mean, that's also really dangerous, as to having people just decide what is safe to bring into work. People are just using it at their own, discretion from a safety standpoint. That's not really great in organizations. A lot of lack of communication has made people feel like they, that they don't get the promise of AI. And the promise of AI is, here, we're going to come in and make your job more efficient. We're going to take your mundane and boring tasks away so you can do all this other creative work. But we're not seeing anyone upskilled and reskilled to do that creative work. So now they've just had their job taken away, and they don't want to put up their hand to say, actually, I'm not doing any of that creative work that AI promised. Also, we're still at the peak burnout rate that we saw in 2021 and 2022. If Gen AI is supposed to come in and make us work more efficiently so we can finish our job earlier, why aren't we getting our time back? We measure productivity in hours, not goals. But the promise of Gen AI is to give us time back. We're not getting any of that. It's even gotten worse. So if organizations want people to be excited and use AI to innovate, they need to really look at these big picture issues that are happening right now and solve those so that people feel like, oh, I want to use AI. I'm not afraid of it taking over my job. And it actually does give me the ability to do more creative, introspective, and, cool new skills that I was supposed to get when AI came into our organizations.
You're not getting your time back. No, I was kidding. None of
I
us
know.
are.
Haha.
No, I want it back though.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's talk about that point, right? I mean, what Vala was talking about, people as they get older, right? Like that purpose was important, that connection was important, those relationships were important. But the flip side is a lot of people are lonely, right? So you got loneliness at work going on, and it's also impacting workers, organizations. You talk about the end state is the collective. This is disruptive to the collective overall. So where do you see this going on into the future?
I found it so fascinating. This one piece of research that I included in the book, this research team looked at how we used to develop relationships and friendships before the switch into remote and hybrid and all these new models. And a lot of it isn't just remote. And I want to make a point. It isn't remote or hybrid or in person. It's that we're on video conferencing meetings all day long. So it isn't that we can't change that in all of these modes and just have more time together without being in meetings. So it's a time poverty thing, not a work mode thing. But what she found was that we used to go into the office or see people and we would become friends with, say, the person at the front, that front entrance, or we go into marketing and chat with them, or go into other parts of the building. We'd develop friendships based on things like how you would in the real world, where you would like someone because they like the same movies as you, or they made you laugh. You had the same weird sense of humor. Now she's found that the things that we're attracted to in finding friendships is accountability and conscientiousness. So like, I don't know about you, but you're Friday night and you're not calling up your conscientious, accountable friend to go and, party it up and to do all those fun things. That's a great skill. But it's like we're only looking for relationships that lead to more efficiency, more productivity. And those are not those don't create deep bonds. It creates more transactional relationships and not multiplex relationships where you care about that person, where you have empathy for that person, where you want to laugh with that person. And so we need to switch that back on by creating rituals where it isn't just that we're only focused on work, but we're focused on actually building community, building a village back up in the organization, and developing the fun parts about work that I think all of us are missing right now. Just those moments of laughter and joy that are like completely depleted from work today.
My final question, when we talked about hope, and it's so important, what is your biggest hope for the future of work? What is your biggest hope when somebody reads your sure to be bestseller, Why We're Here? What is your hope?
I just want people to actually listen to me. Do something about it. Like, here is a framework. I've been writing about this since Unlocking Happiness with the same, council, I think, for the last 50 years. It's like every year we keep saying soft skills is the most important thing that we need. And then we do the absolute reverse in our investment strategy around culture. My hope is that people will say, this is really not as big of a effort. And that's why in the book, I like to say I made a real point to make all of the practical applications. I say, you can make culture better. You can make culture the kind that everyone wants in 20 minutes or less. It's 20-minute meeting of just having a non-work related check-in to say, hey, what lit you up? What stressed you out? What can we do for each other to make next week easier? 20 minutes of having lunch. Cornell's study found that 20 minutes of having lunch once a week with a coworker improves morale, improves connectivity, improves productivity, engagement. Spreading positive gossip, talking behind people's back in a really nice way completely changes people's experience of work and increases psychological safety over others. These are 20-minute or less shifts. And the book is filled with these tactics so that we can start to say, okay, let's start listening to Jen. She has some good moments there in that book.
Very good moments. Yes. Thank you so much for coming back. And you've made us more hopeful, more optimistic, and hope we'll be thinking more deeply about deliberately helping our colleagues and our company culture do better, be better. So thank you.
I love it. Always great to chat with you guys. Thank you.
Well, we're here with Jen Moss, author of Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture Everyone Wants. And you follow her on X at Jen Lee Moss, Leihmoss. Thanks for being on the show. Happy Friday. Enjoy the.
Congratulations on the new book. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Well, that was cool. That was a ray of sunshine that we're going to continue with our next guest because he's full of hope, optimism, and goodness. Ron, he's one of my favorite guests on the show, so I'm happy saying that. Ron Miller.
Glad to be here again.
Thank you. Ron Miller, operating part. By the way, this is the first time I think Ron's on the show in a new role, a new capacity. For the last 10 years, for the last decade, when Ron was here, we were talking TechCrunch. Not anymore. Ron Miller, operating partner and head of editorial at boldstart Ventures. boldstart Ventures. Boldstart invests in bold founders reinventing enterprise stack. Ron joined Boldstart from TechCrunch, where he was enterprise reporter for over a decade, over 10 years, covering startups, clouds, CIOs, amazing topics. Ron's new blog and newsletter is called Fast Forward, powered by Boldstart, aimed at CIOs, CISOs, and other executives who set technology strategy inside organizations. So Ron profiles leading IT executives to discuss key priorities at some of these Fortune 500 enterprises, and along with helping founders understand how they can engage with startups. So great connecting, startups and great founders to big companies doing bold innovation. Welcome back, Ron, to DisrupTV, and congratulations on your new role at Boldstart.
It's good to be here. And I was listening very intently to that discussion, and it's interesting because there's this kind of expectation, I think, that AI is having this incredible negative effect, and I think it's important to battle that a little bit, to push back a little bit on that. And let me talk a little bit about. First of all, I did an article last week about why generative AI projects were having trouble graduating from proofs of concept and experimentation to kind of full-blown scaled projects, and companies are kind of stuck there. They're finding it's difficult to find ROI, and the question is, how do you get out of that? So the idea that we already have all the answers and AI is taking our jobs is just like way ahead of where we are, I think, as people. But and then the other thing is it replacing us or is it making us better? And I want to talk a little bit before we kind of get into the new stuff about how I used AI at work to write that article, right? So I got
the article was called "Here's What's Holding Back Your Generative AI Project."
Right, and you can read it on the Fast Forward blog, fastforward.boldstart.vc. But the thing that I did was I got three research studies, one from Deloitte, one from Boston Consulting Group, and one from Kearney and Futurum. And our old buddy Dion Hinchcliffe was involved in that study. And I had these three studies, and they were all looking at what's going on with generative AI in the enterprise. And they all were concluding everybody's working on it. Everybody recognizes they have to be an AI first company, but they're having trouble kind of getting to become that. And so, I'm like, okay, I got these three studies, they're of varying lengths. What am I going to do with it? I took the 3 studies and I dropped them into Notebook LM. Okay. And then I started interviewing the studies, like I was interviewing you, Ray, or you, Vala. And I'm using my skills as a journalist to ask relevant questions. And I'm asking broad questions. And then I'm asking specific questions. And I mean, I'm checking everything the AI tells me.
Sure.
It gives you a
Citation,
source, and I
link
can look
back
at the
to the-
source.
Yeah.
But then I looked at, just to make sure that it was
Yeah.
quoting or going to the relevant section in a fair and accurate way. I went back to the original and just checked against it. So, but I used AI to interview these 3 research projects, and then I added some other material, like I had some information from a conversation that I had from Aaron Levy from Box and so forth, and some other things that I've picked up. But the idea here is that I used AI as kind of solo worker creating this blog to kind of help me do my job better and do my job more efficiently. So there's a case where AI isn't taking away anything from me as a journalist, as a writer. It's actually making my life as a journalist easier and allowing me to put my skills to work to get some information faster and more efficiently. And I was talking to a friend about it the other day, and I kind of compared it to when when Google came along in late 90s, early 2000s. And suddenly, if you were a journalist or you were a knowledge worker, and you would have to go to a library and you would have to talk to a research librarian, and you would have to get the help of an expert to get information, and then go get books off the shelf and do all this stuff. Now you could type a query into Google and get a bunch of good information back. And I don't think it's unlike that. I think it's another step forward in that. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And so that's just combating the narrative.
No. I feel like when I had graduate student interns in my department, really smart, and these were mostly graduate students. So, and I would assign them a research task, and they would come back. I would have to vet their work, and these were folks from Harvard, BU, Boston College, or from great schools, local schools. This is with my prior employer. But it was great to have smart, critical thinking young interns who would help accelerate my research, and then I would determine which pieces I would use to build my own thesis.
Sure.
So it just accelerated my development of thoughts and game plan, and we see that today. Developers are producing better quality code. If at some point the question is, will Ron Miller have a ghostwriting partner? Like, Claude right now it serves really well writing, and it captures your tone and sentiment. And I think it's better than ChatGPT when it comes to writing. But you're not giving it agency to write fast forward articles. You're just using AI as research.
No, and I think we have to look at this a couple of ways, right? I want to talk about a couple of things, but when I think really early on in ChatGPT, I think it was Harvard did a study, and they said, does something like ChatGPT, which I think was the only one around it then. Yeah. We didn't have Claude, we didn't have Perplexity, and we didn't have Gemini, but it had asked, does it, like somebody like me who is a professional writer, and that's what I've been doing for 30 years, does it make me a better writer? And it didn't move the needle much on really, really good writers, right? What it did was it made people who weren't really good writers much better writers.
Sure.
And for me, like I was thinking the other day as I was writing a piece, like I get this idea in my head and I just sort of start typing, and I have no fear of the blank page, I welcome the blank page. It's not blank.
That's a superpower, Ron. That's a superpower.
In some ways it is, but most people don't have that, right? Most people look at the blank page and they go, like, what the hell am I going to write? And how do I even start? So, like, if this tool can help you get started, and I'm not saying it should write for you, or maybe it gives you an idea and then you start rolling.
Yeah. Jumpstart.
But, maybe that's going to be a good thing for people who have fear of writing. The other thing I wanted to kind of tie into that is I wrote a piece today for my newsletter, which was, the language. I called it the language problem with the large language models. And the thing about large language models that I'm discovering is the better your prompt, the more precise your prompt, the more information you include, the better you write, the better information you get back, right?
The hottest programming language, Ron, is English.
So, I mean, one of the things that I put into that thing was, what's kind of ironic is we're being told that writing skills are going to become less important. I think it's the opposite. I think writing skills are going to become even more important. And when you talk about AI agents, where you have to give an extremely precise set of instructions to get something done, in a proper way, the more information you include for the bot, the better it's going to perform that job. And the more you know as a human about what it takes to complete that job, the better you're going to do. So, humans are still involved here. This is a partnership. This is not a replacement. There's this tendency, and it really bugs me, to be honest, that this is going to be a dystopian future. Why? Because we were all brought up in this 1950s nonfiction that, robots were going to take over and they were going to kill us, or they were going to, enslave us.
There were movies made about it, know?
I mean, we don't,
What happened during the pandemic too? We had a lot of dystopian sci-fi that didn't help.
The problem, we lived in a dystopian.
We were in
it doesn't have to be that way, right? It can be like, this is something positive. This is something that's going to help us. This is something that's going to make us better at what we do. It's going to make, the idea that, Jen was talking about, well, maybe it will free us up. In some ways, yes, maybe it will free us up. But I mean, how work goes. You kind of fill work to the amount of, if you find a better way to do something, it doesn't mean that you need fewer hours. It just means you get more done.
Yeah, we do
working. So it's I don't think it has to be a negative thing. That's my point.
No, it definitely doesn't have to be. And one of the things that we're seeing is that AI at this moment is super expensive, right? It's centralized, as few players, it's closed, right? And it shouldn't have been that way. And so one of the big items in the last few days, at least last 10 days, is really DeepSeek, right? And we've been asking, what is it going to mean, if it's getting cheaper to build and buy? Do you think it was not the Sputnik moment that Andreessen talked about, but more like the Napster BitTorrent moment, where Russia basically dismantled all the West's entertainment IP properties and made it all free? So music became free, movies became free. Like, singers actually had to perform to make money because none of their music would be, was all going to be pirated, right? So do you see it that way, or do you see it as the Sputnik moment?
I don't see it either way. I mean, I think this idea, it's being framed as, kind of in a nationalistic,
very much
prism. And I don't know if that's accurate, because when you look at science and you look at technology, things are going to advance the way they advance. You're going to have smart people in China. You're going to have smart people in Russia. You're going to have smart people in America and Europe. And they're all going to be working on this stuff. And what we've found is, like, if you look at something like AIDS research, if everybody was working on AIDS research in their own little silo and never looked up to talk about what other people were working on, we would have never had an advance in that. So, the idea is that there's smart people working on these problems everywhere, and we're going to find smart solutions coming from everywhere. And you can look at that through a nationalistic lens if you wish and say, oh my God, we're threatened. Or you can look at it as kind of one big thing that we're all learning about AI, and that as different groups of people do different types of research and try different techniques, then we're all going to kind of learn from that. And I think we learned that from DeepSeek. Like, people looked at what DeepSeek did and they said, oh, if you do it this way, it could be cheaper and faster and just as accurate, or even more accurate. And, I again, that's not how I view the world. I don't view the world as like, oh my God, China just discovered this, we're all in trouble. I tend to look at it as, look, this just was an advancement, and it's not going to be locked away in China because it was an open source model. So like everybody like took that model and started like ripping it apart and looking like, how did they do it? And so if they were trying to like do something to
damage innovation in the West, they would have kept it closed.
They gave it to the West,
Yeah.
right? And so then the other thing is like somebody said, like I said, oh, I tried DeepSeek. What did I use DeepSeek for? I asked DeepSeek, how can I increase the number of subscribers into my newsletter? And it gave me this really wonderful plan. And I posted about this on LinkedIn.
Yes,
and somebody said, oh, but like if you ask about Tiananmen Square, it's not going to give you an answer. And I don't give a damn about Tiananmen Square. I mean, I do. But it's not relevant to what I'm asking. Like, I'm not asking a political question. I'm asking a business operations question. And the fact that it's censoring some sort of other types of questions, yes, that matters for the people who do that type of research. But people who are asking a specific type of question for their job aren't necessarily going to care that. I don't want to say care. It's too strong a word.
No, we know what you mean.
It's not going to be relevant to their particular questions that they have of this model. And of course you want these models to be accurate and based in kind of a broad level of data. But if you're looking at it from a business perspective, whether it answers a political question or it refuses to answer a political question isn't really relevant to how people are using it in a certain way.
Keep asking about Winnie the Pooh, Ron, for me. Just do that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try that next time.
So, Ron, through Fast Forward, you're featuring some of the best and brightest CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, just technology leaders in companies of all sizes. And what's top of mind? What's changed? What's keeping these CIOs? What's exciting them? What's giving them angst? And you've been covering enterprise and software and technology and CIOs for well over a decade. What has changed in the last year or so, and what will dominate their psyche when we think about 2025? I mean, you wrote another article that AI agents are going to take center in 2025, but there's so many questions that we need to still answer.
Right.
But is cybersecurity still the number one priority? Has AI risen to be 1A, 1B? Is talent, is relevance, is efficiency, productivity, is EBITDA, revenue? There are no IT projects. They're just business projects. So it's a tremendous pressure for these CIOs to help speak the language of business, which is finance. What's happening? What's different this year that compared to the last 10 years you've been covering the space?
So, I mean, of course, AI is on everybody's mind. I think it's on. So if you ask security versus IT, I think that that it's all one thing, right? And one thing that I always ask CISOs versus CIOs or CTOs is how do you communicate with each other? Because you have to kind of have a situation in the healthiest companies where the security folks and the technology folks are having conversations, and that they're building software and solutions that's secure, it's governed, it's within the context of the business and everything that they need to do. So it's not one thing or the other, it's everything. And one of the things that I found interesting of the couple of people that I've spoken to, I spoke to Rinki Sethi, who's the CISO at Bill.com, and she's been around for a long time. She was once the CISO at Twitter pre-Elon, and she wears both the CISO and the CIO hat. And I thought, well, that was the first I ever heard of that. And I thought, wow, that's really, really amazing. I said, what impact does that have on your security? And she says, like, well, there's less debate. She says we're going to bake security in. It's that doesn't have to be that kind of back and forth, because she wears both hats, and she has kind of like lieutenants under her that are in charge of the kinds of things the CIO and the CISO would be in charge of. But it's her leadership on top of all that. That's kind of driving it. And she says, look, that there's going to be strong security components in everything we build, and that's the end of the story. So you don't have to. I mean, it's not like CIOs and CISOs are having a battle. Like we don't.
Right.
I don't want it, but if a CIO wants to go faster, or a CIO wants to try something that is, leading edge and not quite fully tested and vetted in the world or in that company, then there may be like, come on, we gotta try this. We gotta figure out how to do this. So the fact that she's wearing both hats kind of takes that away. And I had a conversation with Andrew Dunbar, who's the Shopify CISO, last week, and I'm going to be publishing a profile of him next week. And he has the same role, and he's very clear that that things are going to be built a certain way. And I think that when you have those two roles, which many companies don't, but some companies do, it kind of creates an interesting dynamic in that you don't have those conversations. But most companies do. And I ask about how those conversations happen, and how they communicate. And CISOs have to communicate to everybody in the corporation, like these are the risks that we face, and they face unique risks themselves. I mean, it's a tough role. It's like these people face liability for things that go wrong inside their company, sometimes that they have very little or no control over. So it's a very tough job. The CIOs are looking at the changing world that we're living in. Everything that you're talking about, AI and AI agents, is top of mind for them, and how do they begin to implement those? There's a lot of, when you talk to people in the industry, and I know you are in the industry, Val, and your company is producing AI agents, but there's a lot of, in my mind, glossing over the hard parts. Yes, AI agents, when we get to a certain point where AI agents are doing a lot more work inside companies, there are so many unanswered questions to me as a journalist and to these people as executives. And it's like, okay, you can have one AI agent say, doing some accounts payable functions, or you can have one AI agent, doing some other workflow. But like when you have 100 AI agents, and some are from Salesforce, and some are from Workday, and some are from ServiceNow, and like, how are those?
That's a great question.
How are those agents going to play nicely together? And who's going to play traffic cop? Who's going to make sure?
Actually, Ron, that's a great question. You should check out what Steve Lucas is doing over at Boomi. I think they're playing traffic cop. There's some crazy things that are going on there.
Right.
In the absence of a standard, in the absence of, we're not OAuthing these to,
Nope.
There's no protocol that determines the handshakes, the efficacy, the hierarchy. But you'll absolutely have, even Jensen last year at a conference talked about super AI agents orchestrating lower level agents writing code, and the need for orchestration at levels, not just within a line of business, not just within multiple lines of business in the enterprise, but you just mentioned ecosystem level agentic AI orchestration, where your Accenture agent and your Salesforce agent and your Box agent are all collaborating in real time at machine scale speed. And so who runs point?
When agents go to a bar. I'm just kidding.
When you think about like a similar orchestrator, right? Kubernetes, right?
Kubernetes, right?
And you think about the ecosystem that had to build up around that.
Yeah.
Like first it was just like, here we are. And then there was, 2016. And then by, 2018, you went to KubeCon, and there were like 400 startups like attacking all these different elements of it, right? And I mean, I see a similar ecosystem developing, because there are a lot of unanswered questions here.
Yeah.
There are a lot of opportunities.
But
for
given
founders, for startups.
given at least in my 30 years, I've never experienced the velocity, speed, and direction for a particular technology adoption, enhancements, and given the fact that people are no longer talking about AGI a decade from now. Literally, all the timelines I'm seeing are somewhere less than 5 years, let's say. So, and some say they see hints of it now. I'm not in that camp. But my point is that as the reasoning engines get better, faster, as the cost is driven down, the single thread, single line of business tasks that you talk about, like accounting, payable, whatever, will very quickly be multi-thread line of business, will very quickly cross lines of business, and will very quickly include engagement with multi-agents from multiple brands. And I don't believe this is years away. I think we're going to see demonstration of these capabilities this year.
Well, you may, but until you have systems in place that can help manage all that,
sure.
It's going to be chaotic. And I don't think many enterprise customers really want chaos. They and if you start talking about outcome pricing, as another element of this,
consumption-based pricing, outcome pricing,
So if you say, okay, you're not going to pay for a license, you're going to pay for a result. Right. Well, then again, this is another
that's a good thing, though. That puts pressure on vendors to ensure that you can demonstrate ROI.
Right, but then
I'm in the camp of outcome-based pricing.
But if you say, okay, there's an outcome, but who was responsible for the outcome? Was it the Salesforce piece? Was it the Box piece? Was it the ServiceNow piece? Was it, and that's just another piece of all this. And then when you start to talk about crossing systems, and Satya Nadella brought this up.
My agents don't even have personas yet or personalities, right? I haven't even given them personalities, right? they just do the job. We have to get some SaaS into our agents, right?
So. Well, I mean, what you're going to have ways of crossing, people's data sources, and then how do you pay for that? What kind of token system, or I mean, there's just like. You start peeling back and you say, okay, agents are a good idea, right? And they are. But, once you start thinking about the systems that have to develop around those agents, they are not in place yet. There are no
So, Ron, what's going to happen is we spent the last 10 years talking about digital transformation. We'll spend the next 10 years talking about relationship transformation. Because we're going to have to figure out in this hybrid world, and I don't mean location, I'm talking machines and people, how we deliberately design for relationships and outcomes when it's intelligent software and humans co-creating value. And you're right, it's early. Like these are questions we just don't have answers for. But the answers are going to come faster than I think any of us can imagine.
And what is our purpose? I think is going to be important. But hey, I'm going to run down the news in 30 seconds. Okay, HPE Juniper, where do you sit? So,
I think that
30 seconds.
The DOJ, we had a conversation about it this week, right? And I think that possibly the DOJ is not quite getting the point here, and that the companies aren't. Wireless LAN is not kind of a standalone product that people buy.
Exactly. This is a much bigger set. It's not one category going after it. It's about the pieces within that category. And that's where the competition's at because it's a commodity. No one's competing in wireless LAN. Cloud revenue results. You think these cloud vendors can continue to spend massive CapEx, 80 billion, 90 billion, 100 billion? That's
100. According to today, 100. That's
Amazon's going 100. Everyone up. Every announcement got up.
Google 75. And I mean, look at the numbers.
Amazon 100.
They were. It was like up $17 billion for the quarter. It was $330 billion in revenue for last year. $91 billion in revenue for the fourth quarter alone for cloud infrastructure vendors. Just huge numbers. The question is, can they build these data centers? Because there's going to be a lot of local pushback. People, they take up a lot of land, they take up a lot of water, they take up a lot of electricity. And after you build them, there's not a ton of jobs. I remember touring a data center that's not too far from me several years ago, and there were like 10 people in there. You know, I mean, it's just like,
Oh no, they're gonna be Optimus robots that are in there. So, but yeah, but the war is for energy.
Optimus robots.
It's going to be a war for energy. This is really what we're going to see, because if you can't get your kilowatt hours down to 5 cents, 4 cents, 3 cents, 2 cents, we don't get to compete, especially in the world of AI. We're with Ron Miller, operating partner and head of Editorial at boldstart Ventures. If you have been following him on X, Ron_Miller, and of course, one of our favorite guests. Thanks for being on the show.
Congratulations, Ron, in
you.
your new, incredibly influential, big job. So congrats.
And can I just say before I leave, because I want to make sure that it's clear, like, it's not that I don't care about, you know, the political questions to these models. It's because it's just that if you're not asking those questions, the models can still give you good answers.
Yeah.
Even if they give bad answers to something else.
All right, try Winnie the Pooh. Okay.
Okay.
Where you go with that? So, all right. Hey, thanks for the show. Happy Friday. So, all right, Vala. I don't know.
And I can't imagine anyone busier than Ron covering the news in the world of tech. It's breathtaking pace and new actors, new capabilities, new hopes and dreams, and new phobos as a result. Next week, due to travel and business commitments,
Valentine's Day, Vala.
and Valentine's Day. Yes, and actually, I should have said, because of love, we're going to cancel our show, even though we love being here with you. I can't think of spending my time with anybody else than the DisrupTV community. But we will not have a show next Friday.
We'll catch you for dessert, Vala. Maybe
we'll catch you for dessert. We'll come back the following week for episode 390, inching our way to our 400th episode. We'll have Josephine Campbell, author of 12 Tools for Managing a Selfish Leader, Unlock Authenticity for Resilience. And we have a couple of surprise guests that we'll talk about and reveal. We're working out the scheduling now, but we will see you in 2 weeks. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of Fridays from now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Happy Friday.